Okay. So I don't know if you guys are out there listening to podcasts on the regular, but I like Dax Shepard's Armchair Expert. He goes, welcome, welcome, welcome at the beginning of every single one. So I'm going to do that and welcome
I can.
everybody into this session of ISA Summer Sessions. This is session 3 on attacking. I'm going to use that term, attacking industrial marketing, not because they are the enemy, but because we think that there's some real low-hanging fruit to get it up to speed. Some of it is bigger lifts than others, but we're talking about some of these low-hanging fruit things that just need a little bit of a kick in the pants to get in the right direction. So we did our first one on CRM and attribution. Second one this past week, or actually this past Wednesday, we talked about modernizing old school tactics, and we veered into a little bit of today's topic around trade shows. It's hard to talk about old school tactics without talking about trade shows. And look, I'm inviting this conversation, and I want it to be very, very clear. ISA runs a trade show, and we're inviting this conversation is because we believe that trade shows have a place in this channel and in industrial marketing. This is still a people business, and people want to be in front of people sometimes. That said, trade shows need to evolve. So do the approaches to trade shows. So today, I brought Eddie back on here, my co-host. Eddie, how you doing, buddy?
It is well with my soul. It's a great day to have a great day, and the gloves are coming off. We're letting the dogs out because we've been waiting to talk about this one.
Trade shows, so everybody goes to them. We're coming into the fall too, and it's trade show season. Got IMTS coming up. You've got our fall summit. You've got the buying groups having shows. All this stuff is happening in the span of like 8 weeks. And so if you're in industrial sales or marketing, you're getting ready to pack those bags and hit the road. Hopefully you can still incorporate some of the lessons learned today to your approach to these trade shows. But we need some help today, Eddie. So Eddie, I asked him, to bring on an expert to help us with this, and he immediately knew the name. And I'm excited to bring on the screen here today, Mary Keough from CoLab. Mary, how's it
Hey
going?
guys, good. How are you? I'm so excited to be here.
Are you ready to chop it up about trade shows today?
I definitely am. And I'm totally with you, Brendan. Like, there's nothing wrong with trade shows. It's never the channel, it's usually the approach to them.
You bet, you bet. So I love that. Love to hear that. You're saying it's not my fault; it's theirs, right?
Correct. Yes, totally.
Perfect. Okay, great. Now we're working hard at ISA to make sure that we can evolve our show to make sure that it's relevant. But this is not today a advertisement for ISA. This is information for you guys so that you can approach ISA shows or any other shows with a better outlook to get your company max value. So, Eddie, you've come up with a really solid presentation of questions, some really provoking topics. But before we jump into that, Mary, can you introduce yourself a little bit to the group? Who are you? And the question I'm asking all of our experts while we have here, what drives you in marketing and specifically industrial marketing? So tell us who you are.
Yeah, I am Mary Keough. I am the director of product and content marketing for a SaaS company called CoLab Software. So we sell an engineering tech solution to big manufacturing companies. I actually started my career at manufacturing completely by accident. I graduated with an English degree, thought I was going to be a college professor, actually, was in a PhD program, totally hated it, left, and then ended up in technical writing and just kind of like bounced around in there, did some random editing jobs, and ended up at this manufacturing company right in the Chicago suburbs. Had a great time, spent like 6 years there. So started out technical writing, moved into some small business development, kind of like sales marketing roles for a smaller division, and then did some really great things, which I'm really proud of, and ended up in corporate marketing there. So spent, after that 6 years, I went to Gorilla 76, a marketing agency for industrial and manufacturing companies. So spent a year and a half there. Went into the SaaS sphere, and now I'm at CoLab. So that's a little bit of my career journey there.
Nice. So that connects the dots with our guest this past Wednesday, Erin Burrish, we had on talking
Yep.
about. She's from Gorilla 76. So you see the tree is starting to form here of how we're making some new connections. But how about the big question? What drives you in industrial marketing? You took a pretty large pivot away from the PhD program. What is it that gets you up in the morning in industrial marketing?
Yeah, I think it's the experimentation, the range of disciplines in marketing. Like you get to be good and you get to experiment in so many different things. Writing, channels, events, networking. You almost get to like be in sales without the pressure of being in sales. So I love that aspect of it. What I liked about, shifting from that PhD role into something like marketing and technical writing is just like being able to see your work get seen. And not only that, but seen in a way where it makes your product kind of and your customer the hero. So something that where your customer responds really well to what you're saying and then ends up in your buying process.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the other thing I'd say, and maybe you'd agree with me, but when you came here into industrial, there really wasn't a whole lot of things to improve on. We had everything figured out here in industrial, right? So
Oh,
it's
of
not like
course, yes.
exactly. I'm kidding around. Obviously, there's fertile ground for change here. There's fertile ground for adaptation. I find it fun as an industry to be able to explore the evolution, how fast things are changing, and that anybody can really have an impact on that at a company level or at an industry level. So I totally resonate with what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
like
yeah,
the biggest thing that I did was it was really funny, just being kind of one of the younger people in the company I was at for a while, especially on the kind of marketing, sales, business development side, is just bringing that different perspective on the digital side. We were doing a lot of physical things, a lot of in-person events, a lot of trade shows, lots of physical brochures, so physical printed material, and just not a ton of digital strategy. So that's where I was really able to kind of like find my footing. And I think that's what's really exciting about the industrial sphere is like most industrial companies can probably feel that is they just don't have a really great cohesive sales and marketing digital strategy.
totally, totally. And one person that comes on the team that starts provoking the conversation, it's probably the only person sometimes at the beginning that's starting to have these
Absolutely.
conversations. And it's fun to be that person if you're that kind of person, which I can
Yes.
tell you are.
Yeah,
Eddie's
it's
not.
very
He's
fun.
pretty quiet. He's pretty quiet. Doesn't really like to, poke his head up. But anyways, Eddie, what are we going to talk about today? How are we going to get into it?
Man, you said provoke conversation, and you couldn't have said it sooner because we are here to dive right in. Mary, we need to know, and we're just going to come out swinging. We're going to talk about,
I
I need to know yours specifically, your biggest kind of pain points or frustrations that you've encountered because these industrial marketers, we've organized the shows, we've participated, and there's lots of jokes that could be made in a lot of ways. But let's just get it out, get it off of our chest, and say it with our chest. Talk about these pain points and frustrations.
Well, my greatest frustration, I gave you guys a little bit of background kind of coming in with that like digital first mindset, knowing that millennials and even Gen Z are kind of the next generation of buyers, is it's frustrated me so much that when I asked about the ROI or how we were measuring the ROI of trade shows, it was, I don't know. We're just doing it because it's the way we've always done it. And for anybody, like you said, Brendan, who's, a go-getter, who's driven, who's motivated, hearing those words, we're doing it because it's the way we've always done it, is probably the most frustrating phrase ever. Yeah. So we had a CRM. Like we had a CRM, people were using it. So when I presented the data, I was like, well, according to the data in our CRM, so here's what I'm pulling, here's what I'm seeing, we have a negative ROI on trade shows. If we're spending X amount of dollars, this is what we've been getting out for the past, and I even broke it down like quarterly, yearly, here's what I'm seeing. And the answer I got was, well, I don't trust that data. So that's another very frustrating thing is we don't have the data infrastructure that some other companies have, maybe like SaaS, even like financial services to a certain extent. Professional services usually have a decent data infrastructure, but in industrial, so like it just felt like being on this hamster wheel. Like we're doing trade shows because we've always done it. We have a way to measure it, but I don't trust the data. So we're going to keep doing trade shows because we've always done it. So it just felt like we were on this hamster wheel of trade show events. And like I said, not against trade shows at all. I just want to make sure, I don't know, I felt like it was like speaking into this like black hole. Like I was trying to be a very good steward of the company in saying, I'm not seeing the ROI here as someone who's like a big person in marketing strategy. And all I got back was, I don't trust the data.
So, and I'm going to try really hard, and I'm going to do a good job of not just defending trade shows the whole time here, but in defense of trade shows, what I'm hearing you say, which I think is a really important point, is you said, I'm not seeing the value. That doesn't mean that there isn't value. It's just right now, and I think I'm seeing the nods that, in today's very digital world, especially in marketing, there are clear data components to measuring ROI of a lot of different marketing efforts and marketing spends. In trade shows, you're relying on a conversation to be tracked. You're relying on the activity of somebody that is maybe interacting with hundreds of people, and one of those interactions might be 1 minute, and maybe you're talking to 4 people all at the same time. And how do you step away from that and attribute that to something? The other factor is not every conversation is equal, so you can talk to 100 people at a trade show, but maybe none of them lead to anything, but you talk to one company that is much larger or something that leads to something bigger. So my follow-up to that is, and I'm sure Eddie's going to get us there, is, there's a big gap in between value and a process that can actually assess the value. So did you have to take it to the next level? And you said you got on that hamster wheel, but did you have to take it to the next level, and how'd you do that?
Yeah, so the way that I kind of approached next steps was, okay, so don't trust the data on trade shows. Totally fine. Let's look at the rest of our marketing strategy, marketing channels, digital ecosystem. So how are we getting customers? And when I looked at the digital side, what you would kind of naturally attribute to marketing, some people just naturally attribute digital to like marketing sourced. I was like, okay, so we're seeing people fill out forms on the website. That's a really low hanging fruit, right? Because those are actual real people requesting quotes. We want to see like opportunities coming in the door. So when I looked at that, which was also, we were capturing it in the CRM, we used Microsoft Dynamics for anybody who's familiar. And I pulled all the data from there. And I said, here's what I'm seeing. People are coming in, they're requesting forms, and no one's responding. I'm not saying no one's responding because I actually do know, because I have good relationships with our sales team, I am not blaming this on sales. I am just not seeing it recorded in the CRM. So we have leads coming in and we have no idea what happens to them, but we have the potential to know what happens to them. So I brought it to the VP of sales. He was, my kind of like middle boss at the time. So I was like, here's what I'm seeing from the data. I'm not seeing inbound leads being followed up with. I'm not seeing them go anywhere. What do you want to do about this? Because the CRM for sales, our company's motto is the CRM's the single source of truth for sales and marketing. And I said, if that's the single source of truth, like this is what I'm seeing. So like continuing to just kind of beat that data infrastructure drum is really what I think drove more than anything. So not positioning sales as the enemy, not positioning trade shows as the enemy, but positioning our own data infrastructure as the enemy. So that's really where we're falling short, is not the channels, not saying the channels aren't working. Here's just what I'm seeing from a data pain point. So that kind of helped a lot with just putting this new focus on at least getting some of the data in. And this is a really interesting one because Brendan, during our prep call, you and I were talking about this, and you said, are you seeing this like, is there a generational gap in data infrastructure? And in my experience, this is so hilarious, you guys. Absolutely not. What I would say like older generation was super detailed in their CRM inputs. They were putting in details, notes. I could track every single activity from an inbound lead and a cold bound lead, like whatever we had in the data ecosystem, they were following up. The younger generation was not, because it wasn't easy. So that's another thing when we're talking about like, changing buying perceptions. It's also like from the other side, if it's not easy for this digital first generation, we're just not going to do it. So I thought that was really interesting too.
It sounds like you're calling Gen Z's lazy.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Just kidding. No, really interesting take. And I wouldn't have guessed that. I think I would have leaned more towards a generational gap in who's doing what, or just the reverse. There is a generational gap, like you said, just the reverse of what I would have anticipated. Eddie, any thoughts on either of those two topics?
I mean, we've been flirting around with something, and I'm gonna be super direct. We are stuck in a mindset of the way that we've always done it. And I'm gonna say something my dad always used to tell me when I would mess something up or I would do the same thing over and over and over and expect a different result. You know what, Eddie? Maybe it's the operator. So knowing that, in all due respect to us, it's not even the effectiveness of the channel. The effectiveness of the channel has not changed. Really, it's we're expecting a different result, but we're doing the same thing over and over and over. And what is that
Yes,
cue? An adjustment in the tactic into how we do it. We
totally.
can be better, folks. Let's be better. But that being said, we've just talked about, okay, what's the problems? What are those frustrations? Mary, let's sprinkle some fairy dust on this realistically, and let's talk about the solution. How are you measuring? You talk about the ROI, and there's been some scrutiny there. I don't trust the data. Cool. How do we objectively measure the success of our participation at these shows?
Yeah, so I think that actually goes back to going a little bit upstream. So I would call like measuring the success, measuring the ROI like a downstream metric. I would want to push that back upstream and say, well, what's our goal? Sometimes our goal isn't always leads. It isn't always ROI. Maybe we want to talk to a few key customers. We want to expand a key account. What I've seen from the industrial and manufacturing side is just those goals aren't written down. They're not followed up on. They're not documented. We're not following up on the goal. So when we CoLab go to a conference or a trade show, we have very specific goals. Like we want to go here. Here's the primary goal. Here's our 1 to 3 secondary goals. Here's exactly how we're going to measure those. Here's the spreadsheet where you're going to input it in. Our RevOps team will then take that spreadsheet and put it into the CRM later. But we want to be completely and totally focused on these 1 to 4 goals. So I think that's actually really where the gap is right now in trade shows is we've always done it. We're going to the same trade show because these 4 customers are here. I know I'm going to have the same conversation with 12 different people who I see at this trade show every single year. But then like, what are we going to get out of it? And I think I hear this a lot from, people in sales leadership is conversations are fine. Conversations are good. But you as a salesperson actually have a responsibility to constantly be advancing an account. What's our upsell opportunity? How can we expand this? Like those are really, really solid goals if the goal of the trade show is to just go and talk to a few key customers. I've also heard this one is admittedly very frustrating to hear for me. We're going to this trade show because all of our competitors are there. So we have to have some kind of like brand presence, brand awareness at this trade show. That one is very frustrating because, like I said, I'm a digital first gal, I would say. So there's just such a larger opportunity to make a brand awareness play in the digital sphere than there is in the physical. The physical should really be kind of like a middle to bottom funnel metric, in my opinion. So, or I'm sorry, a bit middle to bottom funnel activity, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's just where I stand on kind of like the gap and like where I see trade shows, like the landscape of trade shows today.
So you talked about, trade shows as a method for driving sales. I mean, there's investment is investment, right? You spend an X amount of money to go to a show and it does a lot of times we find come out of marketing budgets, which if it's to drive sales, you'd think maybe some of that would come out of a sales budget. But
Sure.
alas, we're seeing people finding value outside of just pure revenue generation. You talked about content as a fertile ground for growth and for opportunity at a trade show. Talk to me about how you're doing that or how you've seen that work.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways I've seen marketing be able to get content out of a trade show. There's like the really cool ways that if you guys follow like Jay Call on LinkedIn, he's awesome. He's going to trade shows and he's like recording videos. He's doing interviews. Tony Gunn, he's like interviewing CEOs at the trade show. He has his own booth, like all that good stuff. That's all really cool and fun, right? But I want to like bring it back to like other things that we can do from a marketing perspective when you're at a company who maybe doesn't have the same resources as like Tony Gunn. And that is just like validating a hypothesis. So we can take this back to like a business level goal. Let's say we want to expand our presence in food and beverage. So that's why we want to go to XYZ trade show. Great. As the marketer, I would want to go there and we're going in with a hypothesis. We are going to expand food and beverage for this reason. And we think owner operators in food and beverage believe these three things. I am going to go now to that trade show, interview owner and operators to validate that hypothesis, because all that's going to give me is really great content, first of all, of course, but also validating a strategy. So that's like really great stuff that executives get very excited about. If you can come in and say, here's the perspective of owner operators in food and beverage on our, three hypotheses there. So I think there's a range of content that you can get out of trade shows. It's just like, you have to take it back to those big goals. Like, what are your goals? What is your strategy for the next quarter, 6 months, 12 months?
I love the hypothesis testing angle, because think about what you pay outside of a trade show for hypothesis validation. Say you go to a big
Yes.
agency and say, can you do a research study for me? And they go out, interview whoever, maybe it is your ideal market, maybe it's not, and they publish back a report that has a whole lot of cover on top of who they actually talked to and the type of questions they had. Was the person asking the question a question knowledgeable about your product or your company? I mean, this is primary research done by your company for maybe a couple $1,000s and a nice trip to a local location, and you can drive some sales at the same time.
Totally.
So I really love that angle, because it changes the framework around your investment to you're now buying intelligence by coming to a convention, not just going to drive sales. I love that.
Yeah. And selfishly, if we have any really great marketers in the industrial sphere on this call, is you get to like prove marketing's value. Like, can you imagine handing that to your VP of sales, your CEO, your COO, whoever it is, and say, here's my report on this segment of owner and operators. I just validated these hypotheses, or like disproved a certain theory that we had about breaking into this segment. That's like marketing gold right there.
Well, and I know we probably have some salespeople on the phone right now, but that's just not necessarily always the way that they're wired to have those conversations. They're looking at the transaction. They might be midstream on negotiating, and asking questions like that might change the dynamic. Whereas a marketing person has the opportunity to come in and just be gathering intelligence. I think it's a really, really sharp look on trade shows. I don't know, Eddie.
Yeah.
You're out there going to a bunch of these shows, mixing it up. What are you doing? Anything in addition to this?
Stop making your marketing people stay in the booth. Have them get
Oh,
out,
yeah.
make content with your friends and all the individuals who either pay your bills, you want them to pay, to get them out there. Stop confining them into that little 10 by 10, 20 by 10 and expect you to get maximum value. You're not. You're actually doing yourself and them a huge disservice. Giving them a camera. Oh, wait, you don't need to. They have their phone. Go create intentional content while you're there and stop missing the mark. What do you all think? Am I just crazy?
I'll take it one step back. Bring your marketing person to the trade show.
Totally.
And they're not just there to set up the booth, by the way.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah, we that's so awesome that you brought that up, Eddie, because we're hosting a summit at the end of this month, actually. And we hired a videographer to come in. We have ICP fits doing one-on-one interviews with me. It costs less than $5,000. And I mean, when you're looking at the entire investment of your trade show presence, like $5,000 is like basically one person's attendance. And you're interviewing, I'll be interviewing about 10 of our ICPs. We plan to have content for the next 12 months just from those interviews alone, because we have the goals and the strategy behind it, of course. But to Eddie's point, you're creating so much content just from those like 5 to 10 conversations that are recorded.
I mean, I love it. You're adding value on top of what we're already going to trade shows for. That said, the same framework applies. If you're trying to drive sales, come in with a plan, come in with clear goals and objectives, and you're more likely to hit them. Otherwise, it is that conversation that is just, the wind felt good this time, and it was a fun show, or
Totally.
I saw a bunch of people, got to connect with the people, and it's hard to measure, but I know it's valuable. Like it's a tough conversation to have, especially in a year like we're having like this year, which is a tighter year. The other thing I veer into, and I'm sure Eddie's going to drop into this as well, is, not all shows are the same. Yet a lot of them live in a budget together. We hear this a lot when a company is scaling back or trying to look at things. They drop down all of their trade show participation as opposed to ratcheting up one and dialing back another. How should people be looking at each individual trade show? What are the attributes of trade shows that make ones good and others not?
Yeah, I
Mary,
think
dive in, girl.
yeah, this is a big one for me. This will be like my big hot take of this event is if that's an area where you're looking to drop budget. I mean, if you are a mid-market company, I would never do a giant trade show again. Like never. It is like a total waste of budget. The competition there is insanely fierce because like you're literally competing for people's attention. And I think we talked about this during the prep call. I mean, your competition isn't just your competition, you know, your direct competitors who might be at this show. You're competing with Fanuc, who has a 2-story robot and it's holding up a Corvette. Like that's the booth where everyone's going. Like they're not going to come to your booth for very long. So that's just like my take on if you're budget conscious and looking at trade shows. I am hearing so many positive things about small regional trade shows, like so many, especially if you are a regional manufacturer or regional distributor. Could not recommend regional trade shows enough. Like super quality conversations, engaged audience, not a ton of budget, and just like super high potential for ROI.
Yeah, so like strip out the mega booths is kind
Sure.
of what we're seeing. Okay.
Yeah.
We're not a mega booth show. Good.
Perfect.
It's close. I almost dropped the broadcast real quick. But no, again, we are inviting this conversation, and I want our audience and our attendees to be more conscious as they approach all shows, including ISA. So again, I welcome this conversation because it makes all of us better. What are your thoughts there, Eddie? You agree?
Yeah, well, to her point, let me just bolster on Mary's already solid point. So let's say that it's not really in the cards for you, or it's not really cost effective. Send your salespeople there. I mean, it's just I mean, I don't want to call it a watered down version of what you're doing, but it's literally a step further. You can still send the key individuals there. Now you have to trust these individuals, and they have to be adults. Make sure they're setting appointments, using their time wisely, and tracking that. But if you have that system of accountability set in place, sending your sales hunters to the bucket of fish, for lack of a better term, it's always a great idea, and you can save yourself lots of money. You can then put in content creation efforts and other efforts in the future. Big win that I've seen smaller companies be able to make that more digestible for them. Would highly recommend it.
Nice. All right, Eddie, where are you going next?
Man, we're going to go down memory lane a little bit, though. Mary, you've done so many of these shows, good experiences, bad experiences. What's a memorable one that from your involvement, you learned a valuable lesson? So it could be a good experience, could be a bad experience, but what's something where, man, I learned this lesson, and if I could share this with other industrial marketers, it would save them time, money, and make them happier.
Yeah, I don't know how applicable this is, but I'll tell the story anyways because I think it's valuable and folks can pull out what they want from it. So CoLab sells into manufacturing companies, like I told you, and our 2 big areas where we found the most early success was heavy industrial machinery and then automotive manufacturing. So those are the shows we were going to. We were going to like maybe some smaller shows, some larger shows in automotive, some smaller shows, maybe some larger shows in heavy and industrial machinery. Nothing. Like we would see these very big like peaks and valleys in our participation and the ROI from them. We started going to instead, so we're a software company. We're like a little bit of an add-on to like a CAD or a PLM system, which is a big engineering software. We started going to their user conferences and doing a booth because we bolt onto them. Crazy amount of ROI, like just totally changed the game for us in what we would call field marketing, you know, event marketing. Amazing conversations, much like I said, much smaller audiences. So these are like less than 500. These are just user conferences, less than 500 attendees. Amazing content, amazing conversations, very, very high ROI in terms of like leads, opportunities, and eventually revenue. So, I mean, just that was like a really interesting shift in thinking about, hey, if trade shows aren't working for you, like we said, it might not be trade shows, the big T, capital S trade shows. It might be just your approach to how you're doing trade shows or how you're thinking about them.
So in that instance, is it that you were going to a show where the person who knew what you were talking about and selling wasn't really there?
Yes.
And you Yeah.
Yes, so we
understanding where your audience goes, that was a big
yes.
Aaron thing yesterday with a lot of the old school marketing tactics is find out where your ideal users or customers, where they are, and then meet them there, as opposed to trying to push your customers somewhere else, or casting a wide net. So how did you figure that out? I mean, what was the light bulb that went off that said our customers, I mean, are maybe a little bit more technical than who goes to some of these other conferences? What was the thought process?
Really, really like total happenstance. I'm glad I get to share the knowledge, but the light bulb moment was actually really just luck. So we are a partner of one of the big PLM systems I was talking about, and they were like, "Hey, you should really attend this show." And we were like, "Hey, they're our partner. They're a really good partner with us. We should probably attend this show." And all of a sudden it was like amazing, like the great conversations, the great stuff. But I will say the really cool thing is, because this is where our audience is and was going physically, we had already been doing some digital touches. So paid social, lots and lots of paid social, on LinkedIn, especially a little bit on Facebook and Instagram. The coolest thing ever was people coming to our booth and are like, "Oh, CoLab Software. I see you guys everywhere. I see you guys on LinkedIn. I see you guys on Facebook." Like that was like super cool, very validating for our digital strategy. So like I said, when we're thinking about that funnel approach, we see digital as very top of funnel. Here's CoLab, here's who we are, here are the problems we solve and who we solve them for. And then when we go to these bottom funnel, like, super targeted regional events, it's like, "Oh, I see you guys everywhere. This is so cool that you're here." And then we get those specific questions.
Totally. Good example. All right, Eddie, what you got up next?
So it's no secret, Mary, that we live in an age of digital marketing. Right? It's huge. Now we all talk about a mix, so don't let me get too segmented, but let's put trade shows in a spot. So where do you think the trade shows and events, when it comes to their relevance and impact, or has the effectiveness changed? Like, let's be real. Tell me how it is.
Yeah, I think the effectiveness has definitely changed. And I think the approach that I just talked about is a really good one. I think that companies could really benefit from not necessarily taking a step back from trade shows, but taking a step back from their entire marketing strategy and where they're placing their bets. Like I said, the smaller regional events were really fun, and we got to have those conversations because they had already heard of us. They're coming to our booth saying, "Oh, CoLab, we've heard of you guys." So I would say like they heard of us because of like the big brand awareness campaigns we were already running on digital. So I think like maybe mapping out that marketing funnel for your buyers, for your target audience could be really valuable. And I honestly just don't think a lot of industrial companies do it enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's take it back a couple of years. It's 2021, right?
Yeah.
We're all standing up. We're all pivoting hard. I mean, those that plan events are scrambling, pivoting hard, and hearing things like trade shows are dead. We can do this virtual for a fraction of the cost. You can have a digital booth that can, pop up a Zoom call. What happened? Fast forward to now, what did we learn from that, and where are we today?
Yeah, I think there was two big things that I saw. I think the digital events honestly was a huge miss for anybody who did it, like not just manufacturing, not just industrial. SaaS was trying it, financial, professional services, all of the industries were trying to do these digital events. They were really boring. Like no one went to the exhibitors because they tried to do this like weird, do you remember this when they would have like the digital exhibitor booth where like for 20 minutes you were like forced into a waiting room, I think it was, and like you had to like hear the sales pitch from each of the exhibitors, just like really awkward, not very buyer centric. I would argue that that was very company centric, and I think that's another like really key light bulb moment I would love for everyone to have here is like where can we have the highest impact for our customer, not for us as a company, but for our customer. So I would say like that was a huge miss. Now, I'll say on my side, we avoided that. So we did not do that. When I was with the big manufacturing company I was at for 6 years, we shifted our strategy. We had this seminar that we would give in person pre-COVID. It was a 2-day seminar. We would give like 7 to 8 lectures over the course of the 2 days, and then, do like some Q&A and sales meeting sections. We took all of those digital. So we took each of those lectures, did them once a month, and just made this whole like big seminar series, but made it, an 8-month long seminar series. So you register for the first one and you get enrolled in all of the subsequent ones. Now, I will say from my perspective, I was probably a little bit too hesitant with those. So I was like very protective over that list of registrants because we heard from all the LinkedIn gurus, like, don't give your webinar attendees to sales because they're just going to pound the phones with them, right? They're just going to call. They're not going to be very educated on the product, blah, blah, blah. So that was the advice I was hearing. So I didn't do it. And I think that was a huge miss for me because the people who were giving that advice were SaaS, right? So software as a service. They have SDRs. SDRs are usually like pounding phones, getting people to call, trying to get those digital touches. That wasn't my sales team. My sales team was highly knowledgeable, had great relationships with our customers. I would have given that list and I should have trusted them with that list. So I think there was like two big misses. You were either like selling way, way, way too hard. The experience was not customer centric, or you could go on like the extreme on my end where it was so customer centric that I wasn't converting them into sales. So we were talking earlier about, having conversations is great, but you as a marketer and as a salesperson, as a representative of that company, have like a responsibility to be pushing the product, like for the well-being of your customer. Like if you really believe in your product, you believe they should be purchasing this, there's always opportunities for upsell. So I think there's like a really interesting like spectrum when it went like all digital.
Yeah, totally. So everyone, I think a lot of people agree with you, and I'm one of them that it was a miss, especially the virtual booth. I do think that we learned a ton about virtual education, i.e., what we're doing here today, as a great way to scale, a great way to be present and provide value in different ways. But yeah, that virtual. So everybody said, once we got back, that it's going to snap back. How do you feel? Do you feel like it snapped all the way back, or part of the way back, or has it gone in a different direction? Where are we today?
Yeah, I think it's snapped partially back. So I do think people are still excited to go to trade shows, but they have higher expectations for them now. So I feel like you can't just go there and expect to have a booth and do the same thing that you did pre-COVID. I feel like now customers are expecting an experience from you. So they're expecting you to really provide not only like just value from being there, but value as a part of their experience at the trade show. So I don't know. I think that's like a really interesting one. I talked with Jay Call again on LinkedIn about this a little bit, and he had some really great ideas, like, doing contests, giveaways, like good giveaways, big Yeti coolers. He talked about like having pinballs in the trade show booth. So just like making it fun can be like a really interesting way to stand out. And I think people are honestly expecting it too.
Yeah, I've noticed some things specifically at the ISA convention. I mean, for a long time, it's a B2B convention that is very focused on, it's a speed dating format for the majority of it, and they're all preset meetings and 15-minute conversations. But for the first time this past year, we had a couple of those like money grab booths that were there, and like there were lines outside and there was excitement around those booths. And like, yeah, like someone might have looked at that and been like, oh, it's a little cheesy, but experience was there and the excitement was there. And I think it creates a little bit of a memory. It creates a little bit more attention grab. So I think that I welcome the experience aspect because it's something that as a meeting planner, we can have more control over. We can encourage a better experience, and there's nothing wrong with trade shows being fun. There's nothing wrong with having pardon my language, but a kick-ass reception. Like these are good things that make the experience better. And it's not about good food and, I mean, you want to have good food and plenty of opportunities to socialize, but it's just you're holding your attendees in the palm of your hand when you have them here. Might as well give them a good experience. So Eddie, I mean, you go to a lot of trade shows. What are some of the experiences that you're seeing that lead to a better outcome for you?
Interactive experiences. Like if you're lucky enough to be able to get your like the product in the hands of the user. That's fantastic. Not everybody has that luxury, but I'm telling you, you guys are hitting the nail on the head. And let me just be the trifecta so that we can just make this volume louder, create an interactive experience, because the days of you having your 10 by 10, your little branded backdrop, some pens and some stress balls while your pseudo salesman sits on his laptop and sits on his phone the whole time, those days are gone. And if you believe that doing the same thing and getting a different result is going to happen, you are insane. And I say it because I love you and I love us. We can do better. Interactive experiences are fantastic. And when is it ever wrong to have wonderful chemical reactions happening within the body of a human being while they're positively associating with your brand? When has that ever been a bad thing? Let me know. I won't hold my breath.
Nice.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Eddie. Like when we go to trade shows, we do not have gigantic booths or anything fancy. Like we have our computer screen with our software demo, but we are insanely selective about who we send to the trade show. We send people who are charismatic, who start good conversations, who literally, they almost feel like they are the hosts of the event itself. Like they're like bringing people together, like making connections, networking. Like it does not have to be this like, fluffy, like fun, like I said, with the pinball machine or whatever. If that helps you start conversations and you have an amazing person who's then going to follow up and be like, dude, that was like an awesome high score. Like, hey, have you met so-and-so? He just crushed it on Pac-Man or whatever, like whatever you want to do. But if you have those people in your booth who are connectors, like charismatic connectors, that's such a huge win.
I think where the other thing here is that, especially in our world, we have fierce competitors. We have people that have a competitive drive in their soul. And so if you can create a competitive environment that is maybe outside of the actual sale and outside of that, if they're competing around some sort of video game, or like you said, Pac-Man, like we did an event at the NASCAR Hall of Fame and they could all do a driving simulator.
Oh,
And
cool.
we incentivized who the winner was, but I had CEOs of companies jumping in there. I had senior sales leader. I had all age ranges, men, women, everybody, and they were sticking around and watching that leaderboard. So, I mean, yes, the purpose of the event is not just to have fun, but it does not hurt to engage or to, if you're going to a show, create that environment in your area. Figure out what you can do to make that happen. I think it's absolutely critical to drawing more brand awareness to you, and to having more people associate you, as Eddie said, with a positive attitude.
Heck yeah.
We're humans. We have chemicals in our bodies. Why not replicate those reactions? It's
Who
science,
doesn't like
ladies
that
and
fun,
gentlemen.
you know?
It's science. That being said, I'm not a scientist, but hey, let's talk more about strategies, Mary, because we are not done yet. So what strategies are you employing to stand out? We've talked about this digital noise. So how are you making your presence known? We talk about this competition, sea of competition, sea of distractions, sea of digital marketing. How is Mary sticking out during these show experiences?
Yeah, so I talked a lot about in the earlier in the episode about having goals. So having goals on who we're going to talk to, what kind of conversations are we going to have. That's also a really great place for marketing to have an impact is, okay, we want to talk to these 3 key people at this key account. Here are the value props we want to talk about. Because often, we hand off the attendee list to sales and we're like, okay, here's your accounts. Like these guys are in your territory. Go talk to them, right? No, like what about doing like the background research, like, kind of spoon feeding sales? Like they already have to do the show. They have to show up. They have to set up the booth. They have to do all of like, the prep work behind it. So why not like just give them the messaging, like hand feed them the messaging that you're going to have. So we do a lot of that. That's working really well for us is having super solid goal for the trade show, making sure we have the data. So how we're going to track the success of those goals and then follow up. Follow up is huge. So the event is almost the smallest part because we put so much effort into pre-event and post-event that it's almost like everybody at the event just has to show up and have the conversations. So I think that's the strategy that's really working well for us is just, doing a ton of pre-work and making follow-up and post-work super easy for whoever was at the booth.
Yeah, so the post work, I think that's a really interesting one because there's so much, maybe especially at a good show, there's so much excitement that happens there, and then you're exhausted afterwards. You get on the plane and you fall asleep on the plane, and then you get up and you've got to go back to work the next day.
Yep.
So, is it about, and maybe you can share some best practices here. Is it about designing the post work in advance, and and how does that work? So saying, when we get back, this is what we're going to do. Because a lot of times I feel like it's a reaction for someone who's not as organized. Like, we had a good time, I should follow up with that person when I get back, but I'll do it when I get back to the office. So talk about the process, and maybe how you make sure that post work works, especially when you got to get back to your day job.
Yeah, I will say, so what you just said, Brendan, is a really interesting one, and it was, again, another unlock for us, which is book the meeting while you're there. So don't just like, of course, there are going to be people who aren't ready to book a meeting, or you only were able to have one conversation and you got their business card. But if you can and you're having a quality conversation, book the meeting there. Everyone's got their phones. Everyone has their calendar hooked up to their phones. There's literally almost no excuse to not just book the meeting while you're there. So that's a huge one. Then for everybody who you did get the business card, or maybe you scanned their QR code with your like lead retrieval app, making sure the appropriate person is tagged in. So we do that through our CRM. So we upload the list, we put it all into a spreadsheet from the lead retrieval app, put in the notes section. That's another really key one at the event, is make sure just put in, hey, here's what we talked about. We talked about these 3 key features or products or whatever. Make sure you follow up about XYZ. So at the event, making sure your follow-up is like really, really seamless and easy. And then from the handoff perspective, it's actually pretty easy because we do all of that work up front. And we already have the templates for how we're going to follow up with certain types of leads. So we'll also rank leads, like almost like a hot, warm, cold kind of thing. I've heard that before. We do it on like a scale of 1 through 4. So just like however you want to rank the like interest level of leads also makes follow up really easy. And then we follow up like it's, we're, like I said, we're venture-backed SaaS, so we're really motivated, I would say, to make sure leads are followed up with, which is really nice from a marketing and sales perspective, because we get to see which channels are working really quickly. But if you're kind of more in the industrial side, usually you're not quite as fast-paced as maybe a software company, which is totally fine. You as the marketer can also create a sales sequence in your CRM if that's available to you, or even if you just have MailChimp, I think you can just like make a marketing automation sequence. So like anything you can do post show that makes follow-up really, really easy.
So I've heard the word easy many, many times here, of a big barrier to people wanting to do something. So I want to add in one more word, or maybe another concept is, I could be selling something, or I could be running back to my CRM and writing something down. What would you prefer me to do? And that's a common phrase that's thrown out there by salespeople, is I'm out there talking. I'm out there pushing. In order for me to optimize this event, you're asking me to maybe stop pushing as much and to track. How do you overcome that conversation? Because that's a tough one. And it's probably a pretty common one for somebody that is wired for sales. They're just like, I love connecting with people. I love talking to people. That's what I want to do. I don't want to go back to my laptop and input something in.
Yeah, I think then that makes it really easy for you as the marketer. Totally fine. Give me the QR code, give me the business card that you snapped a picture of. I don't care what you have to do, just give me the data. Like at this point, like if you're at the stage where sales in the marketing, in the industrial sphere, sales owns the whole process. That's a really hard place to be, because in SaaS, sales owns like just the beginning. So all they have to do is convert a lead to a customer. Then they get to hand them off to customer success. So that's what the handoff looks like for a SaaS company. For an industrial and manufacturing company, sales owns the entire process. They own the lead to customer, and then they own the customer maintenance from then on forever in a lot of cases. So have some respect for the amount of work that a salesperson has to do. And if it's as simple as, hey, send me their business card and I'll input it in the CRM for you, just do it. I mean, if that's what you have to do to prove that a trade show is working, it's worth it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I think that it's encouraging to hear that there is a mutual respect, because a lot of times you do hear about that friction between sales and marketing, but I think you give some good advice there. We also heard, I think it was from Aaron or maybe Mark before that he's seeing or they're seeing a lot of these kind of new modern tactics in marketing, moving that sales initiation part of the conversation down in the funnel a little bit. And so maybe that could shift a little bit more of the appreciation the other way too, is that marketing is now providing more value to the top of the funnel down. And so it isn't just all on sales to own. They're getting better leads, warmer leads, more qualified leads because marketing has these new tactics and strategies. Or in the instance of trade shows, they're doing a bunch more pre-work in advance. They're mapping out the strategy. They're making it easier. So, well, I mean, is that am I on track there? Are you?
Oh yeah.
seeing?
1000%. Like those that shows I told you about where people were coming to us saying, "Oh, CoLab, I've heard about you guys." That is like a salesperson's dream. They don't have to give like the elevator pitch, like the here's who we are, here's how we help, here's the problems we solve. It's like, "Oh, I've already seen your website. Talk to me more about how you guys do design review solutions." Are you kidding me? Sales is just like, you just made like the hard part easy. Like I don't even have to have that first conversation. So I absolutely, and we get our salespeople will come to us like during the show, either on Slack or they're texting us saying, "Oh my gosh, thank you, marketing. These conversations are amazing."
Yeah. So Eddie, I mean, you've been talking a bunch about feeding that funnel through marketing. I'm sure you've got a few things to say about it as it relates to trade show participation too.
For sure. And people, you have to remember, even though I'm a marketer, I'm all about it. I spent the first 10 years of my career specifically in sales. I've read the books, done the door swings, totally. And so I don't allow salespeople to make excuses. I will enable the crap out of you and help you and make your life easier, but I do not allow you to make excuses because I made all of them. When you are scanning leads, whatever you want to call them at trade shows, it takes you less than 30 seconds to hit that little voice button in the notes. Good customer, had this from this place, this problem, this solution, done. And if you're saying you don't have enough time for that, then you've improperly planned. And if you've not, if you failed to plan and you plan to fail, no excuses, salespeople. If you're going to own it and you're going to collect the commission from it, then truly own it because marketing's here to help you. Don't make it difficult on them and create friction all because you want to be bougie. End rant.
Mary's nicer than you are, by the way.
And that's okay. That's okay. My wife's nicer than I am too.
All good.
So all that said, we can work together. We can work together, but no excuses. But as we're getting here towards the end of this wonderful conversation, and we still have a really good question. Mary, you've talked so much and clearly are so well versed in making sure you have a plan. You're not just going in it willy-nilly because you've been subject to that crap before. So how do we as an industry, how do we ensure to the best of our ability that our participation and our investment in trade shows actually aligns with the overall goals and strategies that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think this is a hard one for maybe some marketers to hear, and it might be especially difficult for people who don't like confrontation, but you need to hold your leadership accountable. Like they should be accountable to how much you're spending at a trade show. So if you're coming to them like I did and saying, we're spending 6 to 7 figures in total every year on a trade show, and I can't see the ROI, that's on you. Like, and I made sure it was, like I said, okay, you want to like fight me on the data quality? I'm going to go back and I'm going to find out every single thing that's wrong in our data infrastructure. And I'm going to just keep hitting you with it because that is your responsibility. Like I am just like a marketing coordinator at that point saying, I don't see the ROI. Are you seeing it? And like, maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. And all they say is, oh yeah, we do. We just don't trust that data. Like that's when it's like, okay, you need to start holding them accountable to that.
Aaron was talking about this a little bit last week, is applying the same scrutiny that they apply to digital marketing or new marketing tactics to the old school traditional methods.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, how many people have launched a digital campaign and tried it out with a couple $1,000s, just a couple $1,000s to try something out, and it didn't bear immediate fruit, and then all of a sudden it's off of the budget and it's gone, versus someone spending, $500,000 on a trade show without any evidence that it did anything other than the fact that, they got to see X number of people only, and that was it.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, the same levels of scrutiny, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just saying if you are looking at all of the tactics and trying to be operationally sound, we should look at IT the same way. We should look at HR the same way. We want data to support all of our decisions. And so, I think it's just, I will say it's a little bit harder. You had to go digging. You had to really understand, and you probably had to go to a couple of trade shows to get it. In some instances, if you're back at the office and other people are going to the shows and they come back and they're all excited and you're just looking at the data, maybe you're not seeing something that is trackable, or that is attributable, that you could, if you just arm them with the right perspective to say, hey, why aren't you telling me that you just did that? Because that's valuable. So I don't know. What do you think about, is that resonating?
Yeah, absolutely. I think another interesting take that you could have, because I've heard this from other folks on LinkedIn, is, well, ROI is like really difficult to measure because they don't really measure the ROI of tried and true tactics the same way that they do for new ones because they're riskier. So I think this is absolutely worth having a conversation with whoever is in charge of your finance department. So whoever is in charge of budget allocation and how you measure the ROI of everything, like to your point, Brendan, HR, customer service, like whoever, like whatever department you measure, go have that talk with your CFO or like head of finance and just be like, I don't get this and I want to. Any decent person, if they hear that from a marketer, is going to be like, absolutely. Let's book a 30-minute time on my calendar. Let's talk you through how I think about this and how you can start thinking about it too.
Awesome. Eddie, anything to add there?
Man, get sales and marketing talking together. It always baffles me when you're making plans for this massive trade show that both departments are heavily involved in, and you don't have them in the same room talking to one another. Plan these things together. The most successful trade show efforts I've ever been a part of are ones where marketing and sales were talking together. Hence why you're seeing a shift in every other industry where sales and marketing, they're no longer separate. They're bringing them together for revenue operations. And mark my words, that's going to be a trend you're going to see way more in manufacturing. You want to go fast? Go alone. You want to go far? Go together.
You got a lot of these one-liners, Eddie. I think that you got a book to publish at some.
Useless knowledge.
Yeah. All right. 4 minutes left in the thing. You want to take us home? What else? Do we have anything else we got to cover? I got a few closing thoughts, but I want to make sure that we get last words from you guys too.
Please, Mary, put some final points on this. I was going to ask more about these virtual events, but I think that we have driven that point home.
Totally. Yeah. I think if we're thinking about the future of events and of marketing, this is a realization that we are coming to very quickly, is if you are a solo marketer or part of a small marketing team, you need to be realistic with your resource allocation. So you need to think about how you can be doing less activities with higher impact. I hate the do more with less, because really all they're saying is like do more activities with less dollars to your department or to your efforts. I'm saying actually do less activities with more impact. So that's another interesting one where trade shows could fall under that booth or under that umbrella. So just something to think about for the future, especially as you're part of a smaller marketing team. I'll say that at CoLab, we have people, like entire teams dedicated to events. We have just an events team. I do some of that because I'm in content and product, so I'll like attend it, but we have a team just for events. We have a team just for product and content. We have a team just for digital distribution and rev ops. So like that's like an action, and we're still overburdened. Like we're still like, oh man, I can't wait until we get, more resources, another content writer, whatever. So if you are saying you're doing all of that as a single marketer, maybe think about like having a serious conversation with your leadership about like what you can realistically do and still see a lot of impact.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, it's going to resonate pretty well with a lot of people on the call here. Marketing departments of 1, marketing departments of 3 that are going to multiple trade shows and trying to optimize all of these events, and maybe with or without their sales in collaboration. So yeah, hats off to the marketers who are living that struggle for sure. Eddie, but last thoughts from you?
Man, just everybody together in God we trust. Everybody else bring that data. And if you are scrutinizing and you are questioning the data, question the process of collection and or those who are interpreting the data. But it all comes back to that and having a solid plan. I've picked little things out from this conversation, and those have been massive. It's not the effectiveness of the trade shows, it's our utilization and our non-adjustment of these tactics as the buyers change. Let's be better. I know we can be.
Totally. So some takeaways that I'm hearing is processes matter on the front end, during the event, and afterwards. It all matters. Script it out, get everyone on the same page, both marketing and sales, so there's a game plan. Know where you want to go as well. Set goals, set KPIs, set objectives for the event that are real. And they can't just be quick from the hip goals like I want to see more people. Like put a measurement on it, make it a SMART goal. And then the last is people. Make sure that your people are optimized. Make sure you understand what it takes to do this right. If you don't have the right setup on your team for it, ask yourself some questions. Do I need to get the right setup, or do I need to change my approach to match the resources that I do have? Maybe it is do less, but do less better. So, Mary, Eddie, great conversation. I wish we could talk about this forever because it's near and dear to our heart here at ISA and certainly those in the audience. But what a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for participating. And thank all of you for joining us today. We will put a recording of this out to you in email probably by first thing tomorrow morning, maybe Monday. It'll be always available on the ISA website. Refer back to it. You're coming into convention season, coming into the fall where there's lots of shows. Get ready and do it right. And also connect with these really nice folks. They put out some solid content on LinkedIn to keep you informed and keep you ahead of the curve. So again, thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. And we'll see you on Monday for the next session where we're diving into content marketing. It's going to be an awesome conversation. Have a good weekend, everybody.